This week in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus teaches us the Beatitudes. It's the blessed are they part of the Sermon on the Mount. Basically, he takes everything people thought they knew about what it means to be blessed, and he turns it on its head.
You're listening to The Weekly Word with Chris Mueller from Everyday Catholic.
Oh, the Beatitudes. As a veteran of youth ministry, I have heard people say something to the effect of, when you think of the Beatitudes, think Beatitudes. Get it? Beatitudes? Because the Beatitudes are supposed to be our attitudes. Way too many times. But here's the thing. Jesus is teaching some incredibly challenging stuff here. And the truth is, we can literally spend weeks unpacking these 12 verses. There's no way we can do that on this podcast. So this week, I'm just going to focus on Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? And far too often, I see this equated with blessed are those who are poor. And it's true. God does love the poor. And yes, if we're to believe Thomas Aquinas' collection of commentary by the Church Fathers, the Catena Aurea, the literal of the original Greek basically says, blessed are those who beg. So we should definitely reflect on that. But there is a reason the verse doesn't just translate to poor. There's a reason it says poor in spirit. It's entirely possible for someone to live in poverty and not be poor in spirit. It's also very possible for someone to live in affluence and still be poor in spirit. Poor in spirit is less about the material and more about the heart. But let's go back to that literal Greek for a second, one who begs. How does that apply to your relationship with the Lord? Now, if we approach this verse that way, it makes things start to crystallize. What's your disposition to God's mercy and your own salvation? How do you approach confession, or tithing, or your Sunday obligation to go to Mass? Do you approach the altar like a beggar or like a spoiled child? Are our hearts truly grateful for what we get to receive? It's a gift that none of us have earned or deserve. Or do we think that God should be thanking us that we took an hour out of our busy weeks to give to Him? See, when we're poor in spirit, it changes everything. Our prayer life becomes less about obligation and more about sustenance. I'm a beggar asking for grace. Without your life, dear Lord, I have no life. Son of David, have mercy on me. When we're poor in spirit, we look upon the work of our own hands, and we know that it's only by the grace of God that we can do the things we do. Lord, if not for your gifts, I couldn't do any of this. The ability to do homework or athletics, to be employed, to make wise investments, every gift is from the Lord. But poor in spirit doesn't just affect the way we receive blessing. It also changes the way we struggle as well. If we're beggars before the Lord in good times, then in bad times we've practiced humility and dependence. So then rather than rebelling against our trials, we instead turn to the Lord and beg that His grace would sustain us. Ultimately, it comes down to a posture of humility. Are we humble before the Lord? Do we consider ourselves dependent on Him? Time and again in Scripture, God emphasizes this point. In Proverbs 11:2, we hear that with humility comes wisdom. James 4:6 tells us that God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. In Matthew 23:12, Jesus tells us, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles himself will be exalted. I could go on. The truth is, before the Lord, none of us have any place to brag. No, like St. Paul says, if any of us boasts, it shouldn't be about what we have done, but instead about what God has done for us. This week, Jesus is telling us something very important. It's a key that will unlock the spiritual life. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Allow yourself to be a beggar before God.
This has been The Weekly Word from Everyday Catholic. Everyday Catholic is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we depend on the support of listeners like you. If this podcast is serving you, please consider going to everydaycatholic.com/donate and making a monthly pledge.